You're watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. From Toronto, Ontario, I'm Samia Sayed. Welcome to the show. Up later, we have an interview with Dalia El-Athamna over upgrading Islamic school libraries. But first, some headlines. Canada will boycott Winter 2020 Olympics. Racialized workers are at greater risk of COVID-19, report finds. First Nation elder passes away, and Canadians mourn his legacy. Multiple fires set to Albuquerque Mosque. Year-long protest over farming laws wrap up in India. And now some details. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced diplomatic boycott of the 2022 Beijing Olympics over Canada's concern about China's repeated human rights violations. While Canadian athletes can still compete, Canada will not have any federal officials in attendance. The announcement comes as the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia recently announced their decision to boycott the Games. While the move was welcomed by many, several organizations, including Justice for All Canada, have called for the government to take stronger action to end the genocide of Uyghurs. Racialized and Indigenous workers have been at a higher risk of contracting COVID-19 due to their close proximity to others, showed a new report by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Funded by the Canadian Race Relations Foundations, or CRRF, the report showed a larger share of racialized women that are at risk of exposure than racialized or white men. It also showed that racialized workers were overrepresented in the industries that suffered the highest job losses in the pandemic. Mohammed Hashim, the executive director of CRRF, said that the report shows a need to eliminate the economic disparities experienced by racialized Canadians. Anishinaabe elder Dr. Dave Corshane Jr. passed away yesterday in Manitoba. Elder Dave Corshane will be remembered for his multiple achievements, including the founding of the Turtle Lodge, an internationally recognized center that educates people on Indigenous knowledge and spirituality. Canadian Muslims mourn his passing and remember his friendship and efforts to develop relationships between the two groups since 2010. Last month, he was recognized for his special contributions to Canadian society by Governor-General Mary Simon. The lodge will hold a ceremony and feast on Sunday in honor of Elder Dave. Surveillance video showed an unidentified woman setting multiple fires earlier this week near the prayer hall of the Islamic Center of New Mexico. Mosque members believe the fires were started by a woman who came to the center last week. National Communications Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations, Director Ibrahim Hooper, urged New Mexico law enforcement authorities and the FBI to investigate a possible bias motive. He said silence and inaction provide encouragement to bigots, given recent hate incidents targeting mosques and prominent American Muslims. Farmers in India will end a year-long protest today after the government repealed controversial reform laws. The United Farmers Front, a coalition of farmer unions, announced the decision, saying they were packing up from various protest sites in Delhi. The protest ended after a meeting with government officials in which pending issues of the farmers were discussed and a draft proposal was accepted. Thousands of farmers from Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, and Rajasthan had camped outside Delhi since November 2020. The farmers had concerns over the withdrawal of the minimum support price, which protects them from price shocks in case of a bad crop year. That's it for headlines. Up next, we have an interview with Dalia El-Athamna, who was part of an effort to start multiple libraries in Islamic schools around the GTA. Now we have an individual who helped build several libraries in Islamic schools around the GTA. Please welcome to the show, Dalia El-Athamna. It's great to have you here.
Assalamu alaikum, Sister Samia. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you could come to be on our show today. So you went to these schools and you noticed that a lot of them didn't have libraries. Could you tell me a little bit more of what exactly you experienced, why you went to these schools, and what you noticed about their libraries?
Yeah, so back in 2015, actually, when the revised sex ed curriculum was introduced in elementary schools, in public schools, a lot of parents, it kind of sent a shockwave in the Muslim community and other communities as well. A lot of parents were kind of taking their kids out of public schools, putting them into Islamic schools or homeschooling. There was a lot of concern and fear and so on. And definitely my husband and I were one of those parents that, we're very afraid of this curriculum. So we considered putting our kids in Islamic schools, and we kind of went hunting for an Islamic school around Mississauga, Oakville area. And to be quite honest, I was very disappointed coming from public school into Islamic school. I was very shocked with the quality of the facilities and the buildings.
Okay.
So
yes, reading is a very important skill habit that children have to use in their development. So why do you think that there are no libraries in these Islamic schools?
I would say, according to my understanding, it's to do with funding. So obviously private schools don't have any funding from the government. And if we make a comparison between the money that comes in from registration and fees and maybe some fundraisers that happen at Islamic schools compared to the bigger picture of private schools, it's actually very minimal. I am aware that some schools, the registration and the fees are a little higher than others, but still compared to private schools in general, it's actually very minimal money that's coming into the school. So it has everything to do with money and funding and resources. So when you have several things that are all important, I think the thinking process in Islamic schools is what is more important than the other. So is it more important, for example, to buy kids devices, which are essential now, or is it important to do libraries? So the money would go to things that are kind of more prioritized as important.
I see. So how was the reaction then from the staff when you established these libraries?
I would say they were very happy because I did this as I used zero to very little money from the schools, and I did this on a volunteer basis. I did not get paid for it. I didn't use any money from the schools. And the books that I got for the schools were either donated or I bought them with donated money. So I think that was what was needed for somebody to just go in and do the library without using the resources in the school, which is very little of it to begin with.
So did you get any negative pushback at all, whether it was when you proposed the idea or when you finished with it?
No, I don't think so. No negative feedback for sure.
That's great to hear. I'm glad that you're getting such a positive response from the community and from the school. So how are kids and parents reacting then after you've built these libraries?
I think they love it because I was at the last school that I did, Al-Madaniya in Mississauga, in Malton. They had like a recognition night for the volunteers that built the library, and it was amazing to see the reaction, not only of the parents, but also of the students who went in the library. And it was just because the whole experience of having a library was missing from the Islamic schools, right? Like the whole experience of going in there, going through different books, borrowing, just having that responsibility of borrowing a book, taking it home, reading it, returning it on time, that's kind of missing in Islamic schools. So to have that, I think it's a great thing. And the feedback that I've gotten from students, from staff, from parents has been honestly very positive.
That's great to hear. So you mentioned a little bit about this, of how you collected donated books from parents or from school staff. Could you go a little bit more into detail on how you raised the money to buy new books in addition to the donations?
Sure. So when I started this initiative in 2015, I did just simple Facebook page. I called it Building Libraries One at a Time. And I kind of added just my friends and people that I know. So it's been honestly word of mouth and social media. That's it. I approach a school and I tell them, this is what I want to do. I want to build a library in your school. Are you interested? And if they are, I just advertise for it on Facebook. I send out a few messages on WhatsApp to friends and family, and then they send it out, and then the word just gets out there that I'm collecting books. And honestly, people have always, like, alhamdulillah, donated either books or money. And I guess because I've done a lot of volunteering and community work in the past, people kind of, alhamdulillah, like, trust me with money that it's going to go to where I'm saying it's going to go. So I've had a lot of books donated. I've had a lot of money donated. So it's only honestly been just word of mouth, nothing else.
Yeah. You mentioned that you have a volunteer appreciation dinner. You mentioned that your husband helps a little as well. How do you recruit volunteers, and then what do they do when it comes to building these libraries?
Yeah. So my husband and kids are the ones that help me with everything. My husband's the one that does all the building of the shelves, and if there's anything, that needs to be put on walls or whatever. My kids, I take them to sort the books, and we've been color coding because we don't have like a coding system, I guess, in the schools. So, but as for volunteers, to be honest, I haven't needed any volunteers at all, because the libraries have been somewhat manageable on my own. However, the last library I did in Malton was a very big library because we had 30,000 books donated, and it was impossible for me to do it on my own. So the principal and just the staff members, they got high school students to come in and volunteer over the summer. I haven't really needed volunteers myself, and most of the time I just prefer to do it on my own, just because it's kind of my project and I know what I want to do, and I just don't want to, anybody to come in and do something that I don't want them to do. So I've been doing it on my own, just me and my family, to be honest.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I'm glad you've taken the initiative to do so. My last question to wrap up today is, you've done 5 or 6 schools now, I believe. Which schools do you plan on doing further, and how long do you plan on taking for them?
Yeah, so I've done 5 schools so far. They're all in Mississauga, with the exception of one in Brampton, El-Amin. The last one, I was actually approached to do it. I didn't reach out to them because I didn't even know the school existed, to be honest. It's far away from my house, so they reached out to me. But I'm not sure what's next. Maybe somebody will approach me with the next school, but we just finished one. So just taking a little break, and maybe I'll approach the next school for sure.
Yeah, that sounds great. So thank you so much for coming on our show, Dalia El-Athamna. It was great to have you today to speak to us about how you built some libraries around for the Muslim community in their Islamic schools.
Thank you for having me. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. That's it for Canadian Muslim News. This was your host, Samia Sayed. Have a good night and enjoy the rest of your evening. Assalamu alaikum.